There's a long story where Bill Gates and Warren Buffett initially met, and effectively somebody independently asked them to write on a piece of paper the thing that made them successful. And each of them independently wrote the word focus.
Filterbuy has grown from a family-owned business to generating over 200 million annually. What key decisions or strategies drove this tremendous growth?
Well, I think it started with, entering in a large market. So, knowing that, if I knew from the beginning that every building that moves air by definition uses air filters. And so if I really could manufacture a product competitively and distribute it effectively, that I would have a large potential business that could compound over a long period of time. So I think that starting in an industry that had the kind of growth potential because it was a big enough market to grow into was a key insight that allowed me to, over a decade plus to compound into something meaningful.
What does leadership mean to you, and how has your leadership style evolved over the years?
It certainly evolved quite a lot over the years, but first and foremost, I'm a big believer in leading by example. And when you're an entrepreneur, it's particularly important because oftentimes you're the one that's in charge of all the systems. And I view a business as just a collection of systems that, when done properly, result in a certain outcome. You as an entrepreneur are the steward of those systems, the person who's building it. And if you really want to get that right, it oftentimes takes working in that system early on and really understanding that and then leading by example within that. And I think that, that was one of the things that really served me from the beginning. And, I looked at this point, we're a fairly large business, but I've worked basically every job that any one of our 1,000 employees would do, over the course of growing this business. And I think that, that has been very powerful. But at the same time, I could argue that it also became a trap at some point because when you get into a business the scale of ours, if you want to continue to grow, you have to be willing to let other people be the stewards of parts of your business and parts of your system. And it's something that I've really been working hard at the last couple of years, and it's probably a bit later than I should have to have started that process, but really developing a leadership team that allows me to kind of focus on other aspects of the business or growing the business, which is really the highest and best use of my time. So that's kind of the shift that I've had to go through, particularly the last couple of years.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever received, and how has it shaped your journey?
I would say it's to focus. I think that, there's a long story where Bill Gates and Warren Buffett initially met, and effectively somebody independently asked them to write on a piece of paper the thing that made them successful. And each of them independently wrote the word focus. And I've been reminded of that many times in my career. And basically any time that I have made a big mistake or a big misstep was a result of me veering off from my core focus. And, I started a freight business during COVID that kind of made sense given other things we were doing. And it was a huge mistake that, I wish I had not taken, but it was just purely from a lack of focus and a commitment to a focus and a bigger vision. And that's why, I'm on a mission to build the world's leading indoor air quality company. And everything that I do has to be, with that end goal in mind. Otherwise, it's not something that we're going to undertake.
That's really interesting. I can see how it might make sense to make a strategic acquisition that on the surface may seem outside of your focus, but then there's a synergy there that allows you to expand. And you've spoken previously about aiming big and celebrating small wins. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs struggling to scale their business, given what we just mentioned?
Focusing on one channel, especially early on. Oftentimes, I think people diversify too quickly in their selling strategies or their go-to-market strategies. And, especially when you're small, there are lots of channels that you can pick depending on your product that ultimately would make sense. And you're best off finding the one that suits you the best and going all in on really understanding that and getting yourself up to some level of scale before you diversify into other channels. So many entrepreneurs I talk to are trying to do too much too soon, and would be much better served really making their business work with one channel, one sales strategy. And then once that gets to a point where it's more mature, or they can have somebody else executing that for them, that's when they can expand. But you got to focus on one channel.
What are some other common misconceptions about starting and scaling a business, and how do you challenge these narratives?
One thing, especially since I've been more public on YouTube, is everybody uses lack of money and lack of resources as an excuse. And they always want to say, oh, you could only do this because you had X amount of money, which is oftentimes not true. And in my case was not true. And the reality is that you have to build resources and compound those resources over a period of time. And, when you're young, especially, skills that you build are really the most valuable resources that you can have when building or growing any business. And, I was able to execute the compounding of my vision because I compounded those skills over a long period of time that then ultimately allowed me to build the successful business I have today. So I think, my focus, if I was younger, would be on building those skills and not using lack of money as an excuse to build those skills when there's a plethora of free information online that you can use to build skills, to trade those skills for money through consulting or whatever the case might be, that ultimately then you can apply to your business. And so don't use lack of money or resources as an excuse.
Are there any other personal habits or mindset shifts that have been crucial to your success?
I think that, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about recently is accountability. And, when you're an entrepreneur, especially when you have no investors or whatnot, like me, it's really important to be accountable to yourself, but then also to build the frameworks around you that kind of force that accountability when you maybe are not naturally inclined to do it. And so, I've done that in the last couple of years as I've been going through this big business shift by hiring a performance coach that I work with every week. And, I know that if I tell her, what my plans are for the week and we talk through, what I should be focusing on, then I'm going to focus on it that week because I know I need to be accountable to her the next week. I do the same thing, with a personal trainer that I work with 6 days a week because it was something that I really wanted to focus on. Things like that, I think are really important. And, I think bringing in external accountability partners is something that I would highly recommend to anybody that's doing kind of a lonely entrepreneurial path.
Aside from accountability, if you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Focus, focus. That's always, I know I come back to it, but it's just so true. I've lived it so many times. And every time that I have doubled or tripled down on focus is when I've had my biggest breakthroughs. And so focus and combined with patience, and, you'll be shocked how far you can go.
So filterbuy.com is the website. I see you're active on TikTok and Instagram as well as LinkedIn. Is there anywhere else you'd like to direct people to follow what you're doing in this tremendous trajectory going from 200 million to 10 billion?
Yeah, I mean, YouTube is really the channel that we're putting the most effort into. So we put out a weekly, vlog style video, kind of just showing behind the scenes of building, a $1 billion plus business. And so David Filterbuy on YouTube, and every week we're putting out content, and I'd love people to watch it and then engage and let us know what kind of stuff they'd like to see more of, and we're going to do our best to highlight that and show the behind the scenes of how it's done, good, bad, and ugly.
That's great. From Centaur to Unicorn, I'll definitely be checking it out. Well, thanks, David, for talking to us today. It's really great to get some of your insights, and best of luck.
Oh, thank you for having me.